Over the last few years, AfriForum and the broader solidarity movement have welcomed delegations to South Africa from all over the world, including the USA, Hungary, Australia, the Netherlands, the German-speaking world, the African continent, and many others. There are many reasons why it is useful to learn from what is happening in South Africa. As a matter of fact, South Africa is often in the news, but almost always for the wrong reasons. Be it the violent riots caused by the supporters of the former president, widespread corruption, the ruling party's idea to empower the state to expropriate private property without compensation, farm attacks, the deliberate changing of street names in which foreign embassies are situated, such as the changing of Queen Wilhelmina Street, in which the Dutch embassy is based, to Florence Ribeiro, and the attempt to change the street in which the US embassy is based to Fidel Castro Avenue. Then we have the most bizarre statements made by government officials, such as the speech by the Minister of Mineral Resources, Gwedi Mantashe, about a mineral that doesn't exist. Yes, you heard that right. He went to Australia and made a speech to foreign investors in which he discussed a so-called mineral that doesn't even exist. But wait, as far as bogus international claims are concerned, that's not it. Think about the ANC liaison tour to Venezuela, and they're finding that the people of Venezuela are so happy that they are having parties in the streets. And the speech by the South African ambassador in Venezuela, in which he said that South Africa is prepared to take up arms and go to war against the United States of America. Think about the former president saying that corruption is a Western thing, and that democracy means that whoever has the most people should have the most rights. The ANC calling Robert Mugabe and Hugo Chavez heroes, or the claim that they can name a street after Mao Zedong because he was never found guilty of a crime. And that's just a few examples. But the thing is, visiting South Africa or learning from South Africa is not just important because of what you read in the news. Not just because South Africa is falling so far behind the rest of the world, but because some communities in South Africa are in fact not behind the rest of the world, but way ahead of it. The South African government is notoriously corrupt. South Africa is often described as the murder and rape capital of the world. What we are witnessing in South Africa is not just a failure of government. It's a failure of a political system. We should not be so naive as to think that the problems in South Africa can be solved by simply voting in another ruling party. The problem is not party politics, and therefore the solution is not party politics. The problem is a political system that is incompatible with realities on the ground, which means the solution is a better political system. More particularly, a decentralized, much more federal political system. These problems might be severe, but South Africa is not the only country with such problems. What we can say, however, is that South Africa has already gone through a series of crises that the rest of the world, and the Western world in particular, is yet to experience. Well, one of the things that happened since 1990 is that the South African state, which used to be astonishingly efficient, has become astoundingly incompetent. This is a very serious problem if people have become used to living off the state. Afrikaners especially used to be statists. We used to be largely dependent on the state to solve our problems on our behalf. Well, now we can see that that didn't work out that well. But there's an important lesson to be learned about state dependency. This is that the state can fail. Rendering people dependent on the state for government jobs or social grants or whatever is reckless and irresponsible. Because once the state fails, the very people you wanted to support are the ones left most in the dark. But what we experience in South Africa is not only a failure of the state-owned enterprises and so forth. What we are witnessing is a self-proclaimed leftist, Marxist, Leninist revolutionary movement capturing a liberal constitution and a Western political system to wage a culture war against ethnic minorities. In the process, we witness some grotesque and sometimes bizarre double standards, such as the Human Rights Commission claiming that when Julius Malema says that he is not calling for the slaughtering of white people, at least for now, it's not hate speech because he is black, and because the race of the person accused is an important factor to be considered in such matters. Or the fact that a random, unknown estate agent became one of the most famous people in South Africa for making a racist post on social media, while government officials who venerate Adolf Hitler and call for minorities to be exterminated the same way Hitler did to the Jews gets a slap on the wrist and asked by his employer, the government, not to do it again. But here's the thing, the significance of South Africa is not the uniqueness of the problem, but the uniqueness of the solution. South Africa is experiencing problems that are also affecting the rest of the world. And if current trends continue, that will affect the rest of the world increasingly, especially the Western world. We ought to learn about these problems, but more importantly, about the appropriate way to respond to such problems. And in this sense, we believe that Afrikaners in particular are not behind the rest of the world, but way ahead of the curve. We have found that the solution is not merely to vote more enthusiastically, or to write letters to your representative, or to stand for public office, or to arrange a protest march. Why? Because these are all solutions somehow dependent on the efficacy of the state. Often, the solution is the opposite, recognizing that a solution will not be found through politics in the modern sense of the word. Rather, that a solution is to be found through politics in the traditional sense of the word. Now, what does that mean? It means, to put it simply, a return to community. It means making yourself and your community state-proof, not to look to the state for answers, but to find the solutions in your own community. And to be honest, this isn't really a fresh or a new idea. It is the way the world has worked since the beginning of time. It's only in the last few centuries when people became state-obsessed, when the state as we know it became our entire frame of reference, when the role and authority of natural communities were pushed out by what Thomas Hobbes described as the Leviathan, the mortal god, the new political, artificial community designed to replace our natural communities. The solution lies thus in a return to what is natural. And what can be more natural than a community working to be self-reliant and to take care of itself? Under a hostile, failing state, demanding a more efficient police service in response to the crime crisis yields little to no results. Organizing communities, establishing community safety structures, and starting your own private security initiatives make a much more sustainable difference. Under a hostile, failing state, fixing service delivery problems by organizing protest marches appears to be a futile exercise. Taking control of your own community, fixing the potholes and removing the trash yourself, generating your own electricity, and so forth, that is a much more sustainable solution. Under a hostile, failing state, writing letters and having meetings with the education department to try and fix the education crisis seems like a waste of time. Becoming more involved with your children's education, building your own educational institutions and managing them efficiently is the responsible thing to do. Under a hostile, failing state, accepting that the state will take care of the vulnerable and the elderly literally leads to people dying in malfunctioning hospitals and under state-run institutions. Organizing your community to take care of itself by supporting the vulnerable is the only way forward. This is not simply the way things should be. It isn't some utopian or rationalist idea. It is the way things have been in the past, and also the way it ought to be because it is simply natural. As Kali Kriel said, despite growing problems and some serious threats to our existence, we are more optimistic about our future now than we were 20 years ago. Why? Because we were once a people whose complete frame of reference was the state, who were dependent on the state to take care of our children and to ensure that we have a future. We are now state-proofing. We rely on our own communities. This is not only an alternative to the state, but a much more sustainable and again, a much more natural way of living. My name is Ernst and this is your fact sheet.